Hello, good morning. Welcome to our online Carb Smart class. Here we are, the second Wednesday of the month. I am Melissa. I'm HealthWare's registered dietitian and personal trainer. I'm so glad that you're here, whether you're watching live or the recorded version later on. Let me know if you have any questions or comments, feedback in the little comment box or chat box on this video. I'd love to hear any feedback you have, answer any questions at any time during class live. You can feel free to ask me questions. I'm happy to stop and answer any of those that you've got. Other than that, let's get going. Today's topic is just carbohydrate basics. I figured the beginning of the year, January, let's start from the very beginning with our Carb Smart class, with the basics. Now, I have a little, not interactive, but kind of interactive quiz, I guess, for you first of all. So, take a look at this list. I hope you can read this. I may need to lift it up just the tiniest bit. I'll find something to lift it up on. Hold on. We're gonna make this work. We're going to make this work. I think that's everything. Okay, so looking at this list of foods, hopefully you can read it. Looking at this extensive list of foods, read through it and see which foods are not carbohydrates. Can you figure out which ones within this entire list are not carbohydrates? I'm going to give you just a moment here to kind of peruse through the list, check out the different options. If there's 3 columns, I think there are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Was that 39? I think there's 39 options on here. 39 different foods. Which ones do you think are not carbohydrates? And you'll see up at the little top, not carbohydrates means that the food contains less than 1 gram of carbohydrate per serving. Okay? Take a look. All right. How many did you come up with? How many foods in this list? You don't have to answer me on here. It's okay. Answer in your own mind. If you said 6 are not carbohydrates, that would be the correct answer. Let me flip this around. There's a little bit of a glare. I apologize. There you go. So, on this list, the ones that are highlighted in red and bold are not carbohydrate foods. So, eggs are not carbohydrates. Salmon, also not. Butter does not contain carbohydrates. Steak, no carbohydrates. Chicken breast, also none. And olive oil, no carbohydrates in oils. Did you get them all right? Did you think there were more or less? Some of these foods, egg, salmon. Hey, nice. Molly says, Molly got the list. Very good. So some people are surprised to find that so many foods are carbohydrates, but it's true. Most of our foods actually are carbohydrates. We'll get into those specifics here as we continue now into the rest of the class topic. So, put my little sign back there. All right. So, what foods do have carbohydrates? The list. There is a list of just the food groups that do contain carbohydrates, and those would be grains like rice, oatmeal, barley, grain-based foods, so like breads, cereals, pasta, crackers, starchy vegetables like potatoes, peas, and corn, fruit and fruit juice, milk, yogurt, and certain cheeses, few cheeses, so the dairy category. Beans, legumes, and soy products like veggie burgers contain carbohydrates. And then, of course, all of our sweets and snack foods, so sodas, drinks, the sweetened drinks, energy drinks, those coffee blended drinks, cake, cookies, candy, chips, all contain carbohydrates. And then there also are non-starchy vegetables, so basically everything except peas, potatoes, and corn. So lettuce, cucumbers, broccoli, tomatoes, cauliflower, those. Those are carbohydrate foods. However, they contain very few grams of carbohydrates compared to the other foods in the list that we just talked about. So foods that don't contain carbohydrates or contain less than 1 gram per serving, those would be meat, poultry, fish, all of those animal proteins, eggs, no carbohydrates, any of the oils, also no carbohydrates, butter, and then certain cheeses also contain very, very low amounts of carbohydrates. All right, now using food labels, that's an important thing when we're trying to determine carbohydrate content. So carbohydrate counting, if that's something that you do to manage your diabetes or prediabetes, it's easier when food labels are available, of course. So you can look at how much carbohydrate is in the portion of food you plan to eat using that food label. The 2 items on the label that are most useful are the serving size and then the total carbohydrate amount when we're looking at carbohydrate counting, trying to be conscious of how many carbs you're eating. So the serving size is very important. Look at that serving size. All of the information on the food label is about that serving size. Not necessarily the entire package. It typically is a smaller amount than just the entire package. If you'll be eating 2 or 3 servings of a specific food, then you'll need to double or triple the information on the label to be what you're actually eating. Then look at the grams, the total carbohydrate grams. The total carbohydrate grams includes sugar, starch, and fiber. So carbohydrate includes all of those things, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about next, the different types of carbohydrates within that definition. So there are 3 main types of carbohydrate in the foods that we eat. So there's starches, also sometimes called complex carbohydrates, and then there's sugars. We all know about those. And then there's fiber, which is actually more of the undigestible part. So you'll hear terms like naturally occurring sugar, added sugar, low-calorie sweeteners, sugar alcohols, reduced calorie sweeteners, processed grains, enriched grains, complex carbohydrates, sweets, refined grains, and whole grains. So it's no wonder that knowing what kind and how much carbohydrate to eat can be very confusing. There's a lot of words that mean carbohydrate. On your nutrition labels, the total carbohydrate includes all 3 types of the carbohydrates: the starch, the starch, sugar, and fiber. This is the number you should pay attention to if you're trying to do carb counting, that total carbohydrate amount. Wow, I'm having a hard time with my words. So let's look at starches first. Starches, foods that are high in starch are starchy vegetables like peas, potatoes, and corn. Lima beans, also in that category too. Then the rest of the beans, so any type of bean, lentils, peas, whether it's black-eyed peas, green peas, any of those. So pinto beans, kidney beans, split peas, all of those are in this starch category. And then there's grains like oats, barley, rice, wheat, any of those, or the ancient grains. All those are in that starch category. Okay, the grain group, so like the oats, barley, rice, that can be broken down actually even further, and we get the whole grains and then the refined grains from this category. A grain contains 3 different parts. So thinking about a little kernel of brown rice, for example, think about what that looks like. On brown rice, or within brown rice, we have 3 different parts. So we've got bran, germ, and the endosperm. The bran is that outer hard shell of the grain. It's the part of the grain that provides the most fiber and most of the B vitamins and minerals. It's more of the tough part on our grains. And then the germ is then the next layer inside, and it's packed with nutrients, including essential fatty acids and vitamin E. And then the endosperm is the soft part in the center of the grain, and that's where the starch is contained. Whole grain means that the entire grain kernel is in the food. So all three of those parts. It contains the bran, germ, and endosperm in a whole grain food. And that means you get all the nutrients that a whole grain has to offer. If you eat a refined grain, such as white bread, white rice, it contains only the endosperm, or that starchy part, which means you miss out on all the vitamins and minerals that are naturally part of a grain. Because whole grains do contain the entire grain, they're much more nutritious than refined grains. A lot of times these days, you'll notice on like a package of white rice, for example, it'll say enriched white rice. So they remove the bran and the germ, so the parts that naturally have the nutrition in them, the vitamins, minerals. And you're left with that endosperm for the white rice, the part that we all like, that tastes really great. It's soft and fluffy and starchy. And they actually add back in all of the vitamins and minerals in processing. They add, maybe not all of them, but they add some back in to that white rice to try to replace what they took away. So it's much more refined and processed to get white rice or white flour, okay? Next is the sugars. This is the second component of carbohydrates. So sugar is another type of carbohydrate. You may also hear sugar referred to as a simple carbohydrate. There are two main types of sugars. So we have naturally occurring sugars. That would be found in fruit, fructose, or milk, that's lactose. Added sugars is the other type of sugar we hear of a lot. And those are the type of sugars that are added during processing. So like adding heavy syrup into canned fruit, or sugar added to a cookie like brown sugar, or maple syrup added to some sort of baked item to make it sweet. Those would be added sugars. On the nutrition facts label, the number of sugar grams is listed, and that includes both added and natural occurring sugar. Sometimes these days, more and more, you may see actually added sugar listed out separately. So it has the main sugar heading, and then below it, it'll list how many grams of that total sugar is added sugar, which is great because we can see then if our products in a really simple way contain a lot or a very small amount of added sugar, and can be helpful for when you're out shopping trying to decide what products to buy. There are many different types of sugar when you're reading the ingredient list. Unfortunately, there's many different types of sugar. So examples of common names, there's a lot. There's table sugar, brown sugar, molasses, honey, beet sugar, cane sugar, evaporated cane sugar, confectioner's sugar, powdered sugar, raw sugar, turbinado sugar, maple syrup, high fructose corn syrup, agave nectar, and sugarcane syrup. There's a lot, so many. And companies get really sneaky about calling foods that in their ingredients list, listing sugar as something else so it doesn't stand out as sugar. So you may see glucose listed in an ingredient list, and for some people that they don't know what glucose is, oh, it doesn't say sugar, but glucose is sugar. So it can be very confusing. You may also see table sugar, like I just said, listed as its chemical name. So white sugar, table sugar, is called sucrose, and that is often listed on product labels, just sucrose. They don't list sugar. Fruit sugar is also called fructose, as I mentioned. And then the sugar in milk, again, as I mentioned, is called lactose. We also have other types of sugars that you may see on labels, and you can recognize them because the ending is OSE. So sucrose, fructose, lactose. So some other examples would be glucose or dextrose, levulose. That one's not as popular. And maltose would be another sugar name. So watch out for those on your ingredient labels that say OSE at the end. If you see that, you know it has added sugar. And reading the nutrition label, it may list out the added sugar and it may not, okay? And just a side note about the ingredient list, the ingredient that is in there the most, so the largest quantity of the ingredient is listed first, and then it goes in descending order, so the most amount all the way down to the smallest amount. So if that sugar, the OSE or table sugar, whatever they have it listed as, if it's at the very end of the list, you know that it's the smallest amount of the ingredients in that product. Just a side note. And I'm gonna take a sip of tea because my mouth is getting dry. All right, so then the third category within the carbohydrate realm is fiber. I love talking about fiber. I think I've taught an entire class on fiber several months ago. So fiber comes from plant foods. There is no fiber in animal products. So milk, eggs, meat, poultry, fish, no fiber, all right? It's very important to remember. Fiber is the indigestible part of plant foods, including fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and beans and legumes, and seeds. When you consume dietary fiber, most of it actually passes through the intestines and it's not digested. For good health, adults need to try to eat 25 to 30 grams of fiber every day. Most Americans do not consume nearly that amount of fiber in their diet. So it's wise to aim for that goal, but any increase in your dietary fiber can be beneficial. Most of us only get about half of what's recommended. It takes some intentional effort if you're not used to eating a lot of fruits or vegetables or whole grains. Adding those in can help bring your fiber intake up. There are different types of fiber. I don't think, I'm looking in my notes. I wanted to see if I mentioned those later. There are different types of fiber, and I cover this in our actual fiber class, but we have soluble and insoluble. There's those two types. Insoluble fiber passes through our digestive system without being broken down. We can't digest insoluble fiber. It adds bulk to our stool and helps carry our stool out, carry the waste products out. So an example of this would be like sometimes like the kernel on corn is insoluble fiber, or like the celery strings that are on the backs of celery. That would be more of the insoluble fiber, kind of in a visual way for you to think about. And then we've got soluble fiber, and that is a type of fiber that it actually combines with water in our digestive system and adds, again, bulk to our stool. And this is something that can actually help lower cholesterol levels. This soluble fiber does help collect excess cholesterol and remove it in the waste in your body. So that's why you'll see on like packages of oatmeal or on Cheerios, because those are made with oats, you'll see that it says heart healthy, and yes, it's talking about the fiber. That's really, they really push that heart healthy, and they are good to eat. Oats more than Cheerios, but that's partly why, is because they contain soluble fiber, oats, and that's what helps pull cholesterol out of our body. So if you've ever used flax seed, like the ground flax seed or chia seeds, for example, if you add water to those, they after a few minutes, they turn into this like gel consistency, and that is kind of a sort of a visual for what soluble fiber is. It turns into kind of more of that gel kind of consistency in our colon to help pass things through and again hold on to that cholesterol to remove it from our body. All right, back to my notes. So fiber contributes to digestive health. It helps keep you regular and helps make you feel full and satisfied after eating. When you have a lot of fiber, it's a lot of volume, typically a lot of bulk in your stomach, but with very few calories because we can't digest that fiber. Additional health benefits of a high fiber diet, such as reduced cholesterol levels, like I just talked about, have also been suggested by some studies. And there's many benefits to fiber like that. So good sources of dietary fiber, let's talk about those. Beans and legumes, all of them, any type of bean or legume, black beans, kidney beans, pinto beans, garbanzos, white beans, navy beans, lentils, all of those. Lots of fiber in beans. I want to say that in a half a cup, so like a canned beans, canned black beans, for example, a half a cup of canned black beans has approximately 7 grams of fiber. A lot of that, I don't remember if it's soluble. I think a lot of that is soluble fiber, but beans, 7 grams of fiber in half a cup is a lot. If your daily goal is 25 to 30 grams, that's almost, it's what? A fourth, a fifth amount in your entire day, and that's only a half a cup. So it can be very easy to get your daily fiber amount if you're eating plant foods with each meal. So other good sources of dietary fiber would be fruits and vegetables. Any of them, all of them, especially ones that you keep the skin on, the edible skin like apples, potatoes, corn, and those with edible seeds like berries. So like a banana skin, you don't eat the banana skin, but an apple, it's best to leave the skin on the apple because there's more fiber in the skin. Or potatoes, I always encourage people to leave the skin on potatoes. Like when you're making mashed potatoes, leave those skins on. That's where a lot of the fiber is, a lot of the minerals and vitamins. So skins of fruits and vegetables are great if your body can tolerate them. All right. Other sources of dietary fiber would be whole grains, any of them, whole grains, rice, oatmeal, barley, whole wheat pasta, whole grain cereals. Do make sure that they are whole grain. With cereals, look for those that contain 3 or more grams of dietary fiber per serving. Whole grain breads, again, we want 1 slice to contain at least 3 grams of fiber if possible. And make sure, breads are really sneaky. I teach another topic, another class on breads in this Carb Smart class because breads can be sneaky. You do want them to say 100% whole grains. They don't necessarily have to be whole wheat, but they could be whole grain oats, whole grain barley, whole grain wheat. Look in the ingredient list and make sure that the first ingredient is a whole grain. So whole wheat flour, whole grain oat, whatever it is, whole grains on the bread. All right. And then nuts, they also contain fiber as well. Make sure though that those are in moderate portion sizes because they do contain a lot of calories in a small amount. So a fourth a cup of like cashews, for example, a fourth cup, not very much, a very small handful contains about 160 to 200 calories, which can add up. It's easy to snack on nuts and eat a lot of them without realizing it. If you noticed on our list at the very beginning of class, I had cashews listed and a couple other nuts listed on there, and they are carbohydrates. We often think that nuts are just fat or maybe protein, but nuts do contain small amounts, but they do contain carbohydrates. I want to say maybe somewhere in the 5 to 9, depending on the type of nut. Cashews tend to have a little more carbohydrates than something like sunflower seeds or almonds, but nuts are a small source of fiber and carbohydrate. So in general, an excellent source of fiber contains 5 grams of fiber per serving. Per serving is important. Remember, make sure you look at the serving size. And a good source of fiber would be 2.5 to 4.9 grams of fiber per serving. It is best to get your fiber from food rather than from a supplement. In addition to the fiber, these foods that contain the fiber contain many other important vitamins and minerals. It's also important, this is really important when talking about fiber, to increase your fiber intake gradually to prevent stomach irritation, other GI distress, and to increase your water intake along with your fiber intake or other liquids if you drink tea or whatever. To prevent constipation, because as I said, the fiber provides bulk, but it does need water to help it provide soft bulk to pass through our digestive system. So if you're not used to eating a lot of beans or cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, not used to eating a lot of fiber, start small. Increase fiber slowly. So maybe have a 1/4 cup of beans or a few spears of broccoli along with your meal rather than loading up an entire plate or bowl of beans and broccoli and fibrous vegetables and other foods. So do it gradually, but start today. That is all we're talking about just for today with the very basics of carbohydrates. I know that was quite a lot of information, but just sort of the overall picture about what carbohydrates are. Carbohydrates are great for us. And next month, we'll talk a little bit more about that, some of the health benefits, and maybe figuring out how many carbohydrates you actually should be eating. That's what we'll talk about next month. Let me know if you have any questions, any feedback in the little chat comment box of this video. I'm so glad that you all joined me, whether you're watching live or a recorded version later on today or another day. Thank you all so much. I will see you next month for our Carb Smart class. Bye.